The subtitle is What I Would Tell a Younger Me. But of course, we're all very young on this panel, so maybe it's what we would have learned in preschool. But anyway, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Fei-Fei to moderate.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. Working?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I understand this panel is between you and dinner. So we're going to try to make this exciting. It's been a day of serious topics. So here's what we're going to do. This is like the most distinguished panel I've ever sit on, and it's not just the most distinguished women panelists, just panelists, period. So I think it's worth it that we ask each one of you to give a very, very brief, like 2-minute overview of your distinguished life. 120 seconds. Summarize what you have done in your life. So to just get the audience familiar with the amazing journey you've taken, and then we'll go through some of the questions. And yeah, given the title, it should be fun. So maybe we'll start from the far end. Yeah.
My goodness. Okay, I'm not prepared, but I'll give it a shot. Hello, everyone. I'm Tsu-Jae King Liu from UC Berkeley. I actually received all my degrees from Stanford in electrical engineering.
Went to the dark side.
There are a lot of faculty colleagues at Berkeley who got the degrees at Stanford, and also vice versa. So I think the competition makes us all better, right? So after I finished my studies here, I worked in industry for a few years at the Xerox Palo Alto Research Center, not too far from here. That was a great experience. Started a family and had the amazing opportunity to join the faculty at UC Berkeley. And it's really been a wonderful place for me to grow and to thrive as a professional. Over the years, my area of research is in semiconductor devices and technology. Had outstanding colleagues to work with. We've made a lot of contributions that have made impact in the field of electronics. So that's one of the rewarding things, but also a lot of impact with regard to students, and we can talk about that later. Over the course of my career, I've had opportunities to serve in administrative roles. So I've served as, most recently as a chair of the Electrical Engineering Computer Sciences Department. And a few years ago, we had the privilege of hosting this workshop at Berkeley while I was chair. Right now, I'm serving as vice provost for academic and space planning for all of UC Berkeley. And I can tell you about that if you're interested. I've had, just a wonderful time as a faculty member. It has opened up new doors for me. So I guess most recently, with impact in the industry, I've had the opportunity to have a startup company acquired by a company in Silicon Valley. And now, for the last year or so, I've been serving on the board of directors for Intel Corporation. So really, a lot of things that have been made possible that I never would have imagined when I was a student that have been enabled because of the path I took, the career path I took in academia.
Thank you.
All right,
Monica.
I'm Monica Lam. I'm a professor here at Stanford. This is my 30th year. You're talking about Steve. I'm actually wondering if we all add up our years, what would that number be?
We won't tell them.
Since we are talking to a lot of students, I thought I would start from the time when I was a student. I was a PhD student at Carnegie Mellon. And my first research topic was AI. You might not know that. And the topic was actually learning. But back then, it was nothing like what we see today. Well, I learned better. I got out of that within the first year. And since then, and then I did theory, and then I did hardware, and then I finally graduated in software. We build a machine, and we discover we don't know how to program it. So I got into compilers, and then I stayed in compilers for about 10 years. So I was here. I worked on the high-performance computing, and I don't know if somebody here working on compilers, and I'm one of the authors of the Dragon book, which is kind of like the most popular textbook in compilers. And after 10 years of that, I kind of ran out of ideas of what I wanted to do in this space, and I also kind of felt like performance is, we just keep improving it. And actually, it was really fun back then when, the first 10 years, which is 20 years ago, you have to remember. That was kind of like a totally different environment of parallel computing, and we built really different parallel machines. So that was then, and then after that, I moved on. I felt like the security is a problem, and I did a lot of work on program analysis in that area. And then in the last, I would say 10 years, I'm very concerned about privacy, about the fact that there is a lot of companies out there, and the world is different. The companies these days actually have their users as their product. Okay, they serve you functions and then they take all your data. So I've been spending time figuring out how to solve this problem. And my current project I'm very excited about is to build an open source virtual assistant, which allows people to keep their data and have these virtual assistants talk to each other. And there's a lot of topics. We are combining distributed computing systems with HCI and AI, because I felt like unless you put all these things together, you're not making an impact. You can build all the distributed systems that you want. If nobody wants to use it, it just doesn't matter. So I think that one of the things that I did that I have a lot of fun with is that I keep changing topics, because I felt like the problems change as time changes. And if I just stick to the same topic, I would just be kind of, it was on the top at the time I was doing high performance computing, but then it's just no longer the most important problem, so I kept moving on. And it's just something I would like to say is like, keep that in mind when you have a 30-year career.
To save your advice later.
So anyway, so that's the story of my life. I did some work on startups as well, and I learned a little bit about how hard it is and how important it is to get your technology out to practice.
See, if you get professors together, you should never worry about running out of things to say.
Not us.
Well, I'm going to make it easier. Since I've talked for an hour, I will pass. You guys have already done.
Hi, I'm Daphne, and let's see, I did my PhD here at Stanford, moved across the bay to Berkeley, came back here to Stanford as a faculty member. If you're wondering about the geographical coincidence of that, I had a two-body problem, which I was fortunate enough to be able to solve. So that's something we can speak about in the Q&A if you're interested. Like Monica, I ended up switching areas a number of times throughout my career. So I started out doing actually a little bit of systems for the first year of my PhD. Then you probably didn't know that.
Didn't know that?
I took the opposite direction. I went from systems to theory, and then from theory to artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence to machine learning. And I've been a machine learning researcher for the rest of my career. I was here at Stanford on the faculty, working first on more theoretical machine learning, and then over time, my entire trajectory you will see is to become try and become more and more applied, more and more relevant. So I started doing machine learning as applied to a variety of things, including computer vision, where I collaborate with Fei-Fei. I started out doing machine learning in the service of science, and specifically biology and medicine, actually relatively early in 2001, right at the beginning of the Human Genome Project, so much earlier than many others who ultimately went in that field. Ended up working on a variety of different things, from fundamental questions in biology, like regulatory networks, all the way through to helping make better cancer diagnoses. And that's kind of the trajectory I was on when life took me on a bit of an interesting detour. Back in 2011, we at Stanford, not just myself, but the number of colleagues, launched the first what are now called MOOCs, massive open online courses. And that led me to the realization that when we saw these 3 courses that we launched that had 100,000 students each, it was like, well, this is something that could make a big impact in the world. And I didn't feel like I could just go back to the lab, write some more papers, and hope that someone else takes that up and does something with it. And so I took a leave of absence from Stanford starting in January 2012. That leave of absence turned into a permanent departure. I spent 5 years or so at Coursera, which I was the co-founder and CEO/then president of for 5 years, and then decided that the company was on a good trajectory and I wanted to come back to doing something that had more of a substance in science. And so debated where to go next, decided that whereas it was possible as an academic to have a lot of impact by proxy, by training amazing people like yourselves, I wanted to do something that had more of an opportunity for making impact directly. And so I decided to go into Calico, which is the alphabet company that aims to help people with healthier aging and age-related diseases. And so working now on the biology of aging and on therapeutics that can help people live longer and healthier lives. And I've been there for a little over a year, and I think that biology is the next big data frontier, and it requires the kind of machine learning people who are bilingual in both biology and machine learning, and there aren't an awful lot of these, and so this is an opportunity for me to hopefully make an impact in another area. So.
Okay, so I guess my trajectory seems much simpler now that I heard all of this. Well, I came to the US as an international student. I think some of you may relate to that. I came from Serbia, and I got my undergraduate degree there, then came to Caltech for grad school, graduated from Caltech. At the end of 2001, came to Stanford for postdoc and received a faculty offer and stayed here after 1 year of postdoc, and I've been here ever since. So this is my 15th year at Stanford. Somehow, I was just talking to Stephen and others today. I think last time I did this, which was not so long ago, I was on a junior panel, and somehow I became a senior woman like overnight. But yeah, as Stephen pointed out, this is actually better than me sitting on a junior panel at this age. That's good. Yeah. Okay, so I've been here for about 15 years. I also have affiliation with applied physics, so my research is physicsy, more physicsy than what you've heard from the other panelists. I work on experimental photonics and quantum optics, and we work on fabrication and optics experiments, and also lately we've been doing some computation as well. I think that those are the most interesting things. I also have two little daughters. One is 2, and the other is almost 10. So I kind of feel strongly about, especially after they were born, about women in STEM and trying to also, help them with their interests. Right.
Awesome. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask a series of questions, and just please control your answer not to be too long, because because I also do want to, after a whole series of questions, open up to the audience and get the students to get a chance. You really don't get too often a chance to meet these incredible women. So let's just start with this first question. What is the proudest thing you've done in your career? Jelena?
Oh, that gave me enough time to think about that. What is the proud? I'm definitely proudest of my students. Yeah, I think my former students and present students, right? But through former students, I can. They've had more time to be successful and be out there, and I'm old enough to see them, have successful careers, and I view that as also a measure of my own career, right? And some of them have, I think most of them have done an amazing job, right?
Great. Thanks for the short answer.
Thanks.
Daphne?
So Jelena took one of my 2 answers, so I'm going to use the other one, which is I'm very proud of the close to 30 million learners that we had on Coursera. I didn't have the same kind of personal relationship with them as I had with my Stanford PhD students, but on the other side, there's an awful lot more of them. And I'm very proud of having given the opportunity to people that wouldn't have had the privilege of coming to a place like Stanford to do a PhD, will never have that opportunity, and being able to give them a chance at a better life for themselves and their kids. And we've heard so many stories about people saying how this has changed their lives, and it's the kind of feeling that you kind of like just stand there awed at the accomplishments that these people have had, and that I was privileged enough to be able to enable. So,
Kathy?
So obviously the students is one of the answers, but I think just to pick something different that I'm very proud of, it's helping to figure out how you use computing to solve important societal problems and science problems. And I think that I would say especially within computer science, I think it may be a little bit, well, maybe to some extent in electrical engineering, there's a lot of focus on industry and kind of how things that you do get passed to industry, which is a great thing, and I think startups and things like that are great, but I really think it's important that some of us are also just thinking about how can you build computer systems and software systems and things like that that will help scientists in fundamental physics areas, cosmology, astrophysics, and biology and materials and everything else use computing to solve important problems.
Besides students, that's everybody sees the same thing. I actually like, I mean, for me, it's like every project seems to get better than the previous one. So what I wanted to say is that I'm very proud of what I'm trying to do right now, and I hope to be very proud of those results.
Okay, pretty much the same answer. Maybe a little twist would be at a public university. I don't know if you all know that Berkeley, where we educate a lot of students from a diverse range of backgrounds, and so I've been most proud of influencing students who never thought that they could even major in electrical engineering, computer science, but also go into grad school. So I've had former students come to me and thank me because they never would have even pursued graduate study if I hadn't encouraged them. So making a really a big difference, especially for underrepresented minorities in our field.
Awesome. So just a warning, my questions will get harder and harder. That was an easy one. Another easy one. Before you finished your PhD, so don't think about after that. These students are looking at you today with such distinguished career. What's the singular most important decision you've made pre-finishing PhD that you think attributed the most to your success today?
That's an easy one?
That was an easy one.
That's an easy
harder.
Boy.
Going down the
Do we
road.
start with Daphne?
No. I'm still thinking.
I think I'll start with Daphne because she can blame me afterwards.
Yeah, I will. Boy,
I can start if
yeah, please start. Thank you, Kathy.
I'm not sure if that's the kind of answer you're looking for, but I think that, I mean, it was the decision to actually, first of all, go into computer science, and secondly, to stay in grad school. So I'll just say a little bit about both. I went to MIT as a freshman, completely determined to major in anything except computer science. And, but somebody said, well, you know, freshman year at MIT is pass-fail. Take a computer science course because you need to get it out of the way and it's a good thing to have. And so I took that course and I was like, well, that was kind of fun. Maybe I'll take one more, but just one more. And then by the end of my freshman year, I realized I loved programming. I loved this. And so I would never, I mean, it was not at all what I was planning to do. And then after I finished my 5-year bachelor's, master's, which took a little longer, but anyway, I had a job out in at a company in Boulder, and I was really excited to go take it. And I, at some point, said, wait a minute, I think I really like these people that I'm hanging out with in grad school. I think that these are kind of my people. I'd worked a little bit in industry, and I just realized that you know, it was not ever my plan to get a PhD. It was not a plan when I went on the job market to be an academic. It was just things that happened. So, you know, you need to sort of explore the options and then at some point figure out sort of where are you most comfortable, where are your people, and so that was the decision I made to basically say, sorry you hired me, but I'm not coming.
You know, I'm going to change the rule. Don't make the answer so long that I don't get to ask my really tough questions.
Oh, no.
Just kidding.
That's a good strategy, yes. I can go.
It's giving Daphne time.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, Jelena had answered.
Yeah. So, well, I made a couple of decisions that were really critical in retrospect for where I am today. But I think the reason why I had to make them is because I was very disorganized and not very well calibrated to what I should be doing. So first, from Serbia, I went to Australia, and then there I learned that I was accepted at Caltech. So then I came to Caltech on a one-way ticket 7 months later. So that was clearly an important decision because I would have probably stayed at Sydney and have done would have done a very different type of work. Then I came to Caltech, thought I would be doing information theory, and then I saw photonics and thought, well, this is interesting. I don't know anything about it. I should be doing that, right? So that, again, is a very important decision because this is what I'm doing today, and I picked it because I thought it had enough of physics and math, and it looked like something that would keep me busy for 5 years, right? And so that was the second one. And the third important one that I made was I applied for one faculty job before I graduated. And again, I didn't really know how well I could do, but I did get that job. And it was at a pretty good place. But that was the only place where I applied. I had to make a very hard decision whether I accept it or whether I turn it down and then maybe not get a job again. And I turned it down and came here for postdoc, and I got a job here and some other places. So again, that was very important. I think I would have done well there. And I'm not giving you advice definitely to do this because I think this is a very bad idea. You should not apply to only one place. But anyway, I mean, it was really important. Yeah.
Okay, so 2 decisions that I think were critical is first, and this is a failure mode that I've seen in some of my newer grad students that I always try and avoid, is I didn't experience what was called thesisitis, which is that period of like, I'm not going to really work on anything until that perfect thesis topic just falls into my mind because it'll just erupt from like a bolt of lightning from heaven. I don't think it works that way, and just pick something that you're excited about, that you think is going to be fun to work on, and it may end up being your thesis topic, but even if it's not, it looks really good on your resume, and it expands your horizons and exposes you to new ideas and new people, and I did that, and actually the 2 things that I ended up picking, each could have turned into a thesis topic. I ended up with 2 thesis topics worth of material, and one of them was my thesis, and the other one was actually my job talk, and it was great. The other one that I think is important is not to be afraid of taking on something that seems like really big because, well, if it's that important, somebody surely must have done that before. One of the 2 things that I worked on ended up giving an exponential time reduction in the running time of a fundamental problem. And if I'd thought about this at the beginning and said, oh my God, if it were that big, someone surely must have done that, they didn't. And so I think it's important to not be afraid of taking on something really big. I wasted enough time so we don't get to the hard questions?
I'm still going to ask you the hard question.
I have a very short answer. In my second year, everybody in my class wanted to take a leave of absence. I don't know why, but that's probably because you finished your quals. And I was thinking the same thing. I planned everything. And there was one last person I have to talk to, and that is because I need to get a recommendation letter from my own advisor. I waited till the very end. I went in to see my advisor, and my advisor said, if you ask me, I would say no. And it was just incredible. His advice was so simple and clear, and he explained it. And I took his advice, and I am so happy he did that. And just an advice I want to give here while I'm at this is like it is really important to talk to not just your peers. You have to talk to somebody who's been there and done that. And this is important as a PhD student. And when you get your job anywhere, look for a mentor because it helped me. My mentor here is John Hennessy, and I benefited from that greatly. Okay, so make sure you don't just talk to your peers.
I can see, Monica, you're a great student. You keep anticipating my questions.
Oh, okay.
Okay, along that line, just to give a different answer, similar, a mentor and an advocate. So one example would be somebody whom you choose to spend the rest of your life with. So I got married before I graduated, so my husband was a little bit ahead of me, but yeah, he's been a source of support. A lot of us maybe don't know what we can accomplish. It's helpful to have somebody who believes in you and will support you and always encourage you. And so, I thought about dropping out of the PhD program. I thought about a lot of things, and I think because of his support, I've been able to, overcome challenges more easily.
Okay, great. So here's a question that you have to search in your memory a little bit. What is the thing that during your grad school time you're freaking out so much about that in hindsight, it really didn't matter?
Do you still remember?
is our last question, or is that,
No, this is all my last question.
I was freaking out when I was trying to quit. Yes. In hindsight, it's a decision. I could have made a big mistake. I don't know. It's short.
I'll say because we talked about it earlier, the imposter syndrome. I mean, I was freaking out because I knew I was surrounded by people who were a lot smarter than I was, and there was a point at which I was like, well, why should I get a PhD when there's all these really super smart people doing it? And in retrospect, it doesn't matter because that is only one of many factors that make you successful. And so, and just kind of in general, the smartest people are not always the most successful people, and vice versa. So anyway.
But I would say you probably were smarter than the others too.
That may be. But there were some really smart,
Kathy.
really smart people.
Answer, yeah.
Well, I don't know if it doesn't matter, but I was freaking out about the looming prospect of the two-body problem. The job market when I graduated was definitely very different than it was today. I had colleagues, fellow students who sent out 60 applications and got one job interview, very different than the way it is today. And I was freaking out about the possibility of a 3,000-mile commute. So I don't know that it didn't matter. I was lucky that I didn't have to go there, but it was one of the reasons why I ended up taking a postdoc at Berkeley as opposed to going directly to a faculty position. And that turned out to be a great decision because I ended up back here. But it was definitely a very significant source of stress.
Well, I'm sure I was freaking out about a lot of things, but yeah, I guess, well, being an international student, I think there is maybe a little bit more pressure on you because you have to find a job and you have to pass quals or you have to go back home. And especially the place that I'm from was not a really good place to go back at that time because there was a war going on. So there were existential reasons for staying here, and then that puts additional pressure on your, you're doing research which you enjoy, but you also need to find a job and you need to be good and all of that because there is no option of going back, right? And in retrospect, it doesn't matter because everything is good, and I'm sure I would have found another job and so on. But I guess as an international student, you have a very different perspective of that, especially if you need renew visa every year, and all of that. It's not so easy, right?
Yeah, imposter syndrome is pretty common.
All right. I do have a lot of questions, don't I? We should 5:30 is where we stop. So 2 more questions, then we open to this one. You should answer quickly. There's no 1, 2, 3, just one. What is the singular character you attribute to yourself that brings you to where you are today? Just one word, okay, not 3.
Can I offer mine? Fearless.
Good, fearless. Next.
I don't care.
For me, maybe
Tsu-Jae?
gratitude.
Gratitude.
Determination.
Grit.
Grit.
I think I'm rebellious.
Very good. All right. What is the singular thing you want to change if you have to dial time back to grad school? Is there anything you want to change?
Grad school.
Or kindergarten? I don't care which one. Pick your time frame.
I like my grad school.
All right. Just say one thing you want to change in your career journey if you're given that opportunity.
I can start. I think there were a lot of things that I could have skipped to spend more time with my family looking back. It's hard to say no when you're young and sort of under pressure to make tenure.
I think as a grad student, I would have taken more math. I took a lot of math, but I now wish I had. It just helps you in all these interdisciplinary things to have a little bit more.
I would have liked to try and do something really big sooner than Coursera. I would have liked to have done that 5 or 7 years earlier.
In grad school? In grad school, probably I should have asked for more people for an advice instead of learning from my own mistakes and correcting trajectories. I think, but I didn't talk to enough people, and I probably, in retrospect, I should have done that.
Monica, do you have yours?
Yeah, I probably would have done less with startups.
I'm just going to inject mine as well. I wish I had taken one more year to graduate. I was rushing so much because I thought that getting a job is more important. But in hindsight, that freedom to enjoy research, to explore is just so precious. So I know we're almost done, but I think there's one question I will ask on behalf of the audience you all appreciate. Let's ask a boy question, since we're in a group of women, a room of women. So I'm not going to ask you about bad boy questions, but, you know, these are the young people in the age, not only they're thinking about career, they're thinking about family, they're thinking about relationships. Just a boy advice or relationship advice for these women who are embarking on a tremendous career. What would be the advice you give to your woman graduate student if they ask you? Not necessarily about which kind of boy, that's not what I mean. I meant relationship. How do you deal with relationship and career?
I'm willing to go first on that one because it's one that I've thought about. So there's two actually. Can I do two?
Yes. Yes, take mine.
The first is that who you pick as a partner really, really matters. The fact that it's someone who is supportive and views your career to be as important as their career is really important, is really critical. And I've seen failure modes of women who have struggled because their partner was like, what do you mean I have to stay with the kids while you go to a conference? I can't do that. And I'm not kidding. And that's not work. That's not something that can't work. The other one is that as you end up having a family and having to balance work and personal life, there's just not enough hours in the day for everything that you feel like you need to do. So you kind of have to let some stuff go. And so you just have to recognize that you sometimes need to outsource stuff like who does your laundry or who drives your kids to after-school activities. And you have to figure out what it is that you are willing to outsource. And it's going to be different for different ones of you. And that it won't get done exactly the way that you would do it. So my nanny does her laundry and she puts the whites with the coloreds and I just have to let it go. And that's okay. So you just have to decide what it is you're going to spend your time on, and it should be the stuff that you really care about. And for the rest of it, it's like, it's okay if it's not perfect.
Awesome. Anything to add here?
Well, I think the same thing is true when finding a supportive partner is incredibly important, but also then you have to somehow divide up all of these responsibilities. And how you divide them up is completely up to the two of you. And it can be some weird combination. I mean, there's sort of the traditional model of, the mom stays with the kids and husband doesn't. And so, I'll just give an example. The way we divided up the carpooling thing, which is an enormous problem when the kids are like out of diapers and stuff and you're driving them all over the place, is I did the carpools. We had these complex carpools with 10 different kids in it and multiple cars going different directions. I organized the whole thing and my husband did all the driving. That was how So, it's you just have to kind of figure out what works for you.
Okay, I have a boy suggestion. Have more than one boyfriend. Sequentially.
At the same time?
But just don't marry the first person you meet. Because you have to do this machine learning thing, you have to sample.
Oh, it's a big data problem.
But you learn who you like, and then you can do a better choice. And it's a really important decision.
I'm telling you, this is a good panel. Jelena?
Well, I completely agree. You have to find someone who is very supportive and really, really supportive, right, person, and that's the key. And and then balancing family and work is hard. And I always remember when I was pregnant with my first kid, Andrea told me, oh, you feel guilty a lot, and I didn't understand that. And now I completely understand after 2 kids, because I've been feeling guilty for the past 10 years. I mean, despite big support from my husband and everything, I still, feel guilty when I'm not with my kids, and I feel guilty when I'm not with my students, but I'm with my kids, and for me it's really hard to balance. But I'm, kind of embraced all the chaos, and I think it's been going well so far. And I keep in my office a drawing that my daughter drew like a few years ago when she was maybe 6 or 7, which shows me and her, and she tells me there is a little balloon, and she says, "Mom, can you play with me?" And then my response is, "Sorry, honey, I have to finish my proposal." So that's a good reminder, to balance work and life, right? It's right there, right?
Yeah, speaking of guilt, this is my dinner time with my 21-month-old. So,
Yeah.
Tsu-Jae.
No, I agree with everything that's been said here.
All right, now we can open up to the audience. Keep up with the quality of questions.
So research is a very open-ended field, and as a professor, you have a number of different responsibilities and a number of different roles in startups and nonprofits and such. What are different ways that you define success for yourself, and who do you look to, or where do you look for feedback?
Okay, definition of success. Try to give shorter answers because I already see so many hands up. Tsu-Jae.
That's actually a tough question. So you're ready to be a professor. Definition of success? I think just based on the impact that my work has had, either in the field or with individual students or colleagues and so on. So I think success is measured by impact. That's it.
I agree.
Wow.
All right.
Anybody else?
Unanimous.
Okay. One.
That's your question already.
Pick your best question. No, you have to pick one because there are other people asking questions.
Do you think are important to keep in mind when you define your project and direction right after you launch your faculty career?
Yeah. What's important when you pick a project?
Well, I think that we all said it is impact, but I have some concrete advice about your first project. You have to know that the metric for your success, you're going for tenure, and what people want is a home run, okay? They don't know what number of papers, they don't count the number of papers, okay? So you just have to decide, what is it that I'm going to be famous for? And what do I want to be associated with? And you spend your time working on that. Don't write extra papers that they don't contribute, okay? And one thing that is interesting is like you have 6 years. People worry about it, but it is actually that you have 6 years. And so you have to remember the first 2 years is kind of like your honeymoon period. Do not fret over like whether you get a paper published right then. You have to use that time for yourself to figure out what it is going to be and do and focus on that. I don't know which problem you will end up picking, but just make sure that you focus on the one thing that you want to be known for and take your time in the first 2 years.
Any other advice?
I agree with Monica, but I'll also add that it's important to pick something that you genuinely care and are passionate about rather than something that you just think will look good on to your tenure committee, because it's really hard to do your best work if it's not something that you're truly passionate about. So I would really try not to think about your tenure committee as your ultimate judge, but about what you yourself will feel proud of in 6 years as the ultimate judge. I think that also coincides with Monica's suggestions that if you have a bunch of like little scattered papers and you just have a really long CV, that's not something you're going to feel really proud of at the end of 6 years. So think back, in 6 years, what would you like to look back on and say, I'm so proud of that accomplishment?
Anything else? Okay. Somebody had a hands up back there. Sure. Yes. Green shirt. Yep.
So one of my questions was the most interesting one, I guess, is that as a woman faculty, as a female faculty, especially in the years in which you started out, what were some of the female-specific challenges that you faced, or some interesting examples that you think are not around today because of some efforts?
Ooh, not around today.
Don't know it's no.
Female-specific challenges.
It hasn't evolved that
Yeah,
much.
it hasn't improved any.
Okay. Jelena, you need to go give a talk, so I will give
Apologize,
you...
I have to give a talk to physics students at 5:20, so I have like 5 more minutes to talk here. Well, I guess for me it's interesting because at the time when I grew up in Serbia or former Yugoslavia, it was much more gender balanced, and I didn't really, there were a lot of girls in engineering or math or science, and I didn't even realize that that was unusual until I came to grad school here, right? So I don't think, well, I think people are raising awareness of this more now than 15 years ago. I think challenges are probably similar, but I think considering the environment where I grew up, I probably didn't notice many of these challenges because I just grew up not knowing of any challenges, right? And I didn't even notice that there were not many women around me when I came to Caltech until someone pointed that out, right? That there are only 3 women in this building, right? so that was, yeah, oh really? Yeah. So, and you know, I think on the other hand, I think that probably provided me with some protection because I just didn't really notice anything. So I didn't really even think about it at all, right? Until I realized that I should be thinking and, you know, help, you know, changing things and helping people change things. So that's, so it's probably very similar. I think that we're talking more about challenges today.
I have one. I think that one of the challenges I had early on is teaching. Okay, so actually there are other male colleagues I have. They all have that, you know, they don't, we've never taught before, and then all of a sudden you went from being a student and now you're a professor, and then you started teaching, and then you're learning on the job. And I did have a person from the Center of Teaching and Learning come and look at my lectures and stuff, and she gave me some tips. And she totally just said, it's like, look, Monica, everybody has been studied, all the professors that people have are all male, okay? At that time, I was the only female professor in computer science, and they have never seen a female professor. And they basically said that, okay, you have to know that the men are typically much more assertive when they give talks. And so she gave me tips. I found that I didn't have any problem with my research talks. But students, especially when you go down to the lower grades, I mean, the undergraduates are harder than the graduate students. And I learned how to defend myself. You know, I don't know how to brag as much as they can or be assertive, but I spend a little bit more time talking about things that I know that are outside of the textbooks, just to give them the confidence that I know what I'm talking about. And so I think that that's an example, I would say. I don't know if things have changed and improved, but there really was one. I think that that's a gender difference because of the way we usually talk.
Daphne?
One challenge, I think, is that, and I'm overgeneralizing, and I recognize that, but a lot of your male colleagues will have a wife who is either a stay-at-home mom or someone who works a part-time job, and as such, things that are a real challenge for women with a family, where realistically, at best, you can expect a 50-50 split in most cases of the various household things. Now, that's not 100% true, but it's largely true. And for a lot of your male colleagues, they have someone who takes care of most of the stuff, and they can just go off and give dozens of talks around the world, and they don't have to worry about who picks up the kids from daycare and so on and so forth. And I think that comparison could be problematic because you're like competing with someone who, when it comes for tenure or various, you know, awards or such, with someone who has probably 10 or 15 hours more of work a week to give without it being a stress on their schedule. And again, I'm overgeneralizing, but statistically, it's largely true.
Yeah, I really agree. Like the ability to travel and have dinner meetings. I really dread dinner meetings, and I know how much I'm missing because of that.
I was just going to add to, well, I think I lost my train of thought when you said dinner meetings, but I guess I think I was going to say that even in a 50-50 couple, there's still differences. And so what I remember was when my youngest was born and she didn't sleep well. And there was like the first 3 weeks of her life, I remember thinking, I don't know if I'm ever going to read my email again, much less, actually do some research again. And my husband, he was taking the hardest shift because she would be awake all night. And my mother stayed with us for a while, so she would take one of the shifts, and I'd go to sleep for a while, and then I'd get up, and he would take like the midnight to 4 a.m. shift was his, where he'd sit and rock with her or walk around the house or whatever. But I would get up in the morning at 4 to take over, and he had written all these theorems on this scratch pad of paper. It's like my brain wasn't working yet, but his was even at that time. So even though he was doing very much his fair share of the work, there was still a big difference.
I guess I've been pretty fortunate. I don't really think that I've suffered anything because I was a woman. I mean, I think we have really good colleagues at Berkeley, so I can't complain about anything. Yeah, if anything, it's more like I often volunteer to do things probably more than my share, but that's my own fault.
Okay, another question? Back there. Yeah. You.
Yeah.
So, like, as professors, like, you have, like, huge influence on your students' lives. So, were you ever scared that you would sort of mess things up?
Wait till you become a parent.
Yeah, well, I'll answer that because I have to leave. But I also, my students will tell you I like to surround myself with people who don't listen to me, and that actually helps because they don't listen, and I'm not worried that I'll mess up. They can always rebel and say no, right? That's good. Yeah, that works. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Sorry for having
I think it's definitely possible for people to mess up their students by, I've seen faculty who really abuse their students in ways that I consider to be unconscionable. You should avoid doing that. But I think otherwise you should go in with the premise that your grad students are grown-ups and they should be able, you're there as a mentor, you're there as support, as a sounding board, but they should be able to navigate their own path forward because that, after all, is what the rest of their career will be like. And so as long as you're not abusive, which, as I said, does happen, I think it's hard to mess them up too much.
I looked at it very differently. I have a lot of really good students, and my thought is, how do I make the most out of their talent? And one of the students I have, he had like a master's thesis from MIT. And people thought he had a PhD already, and people were inviting him to be on program committees. And he became my student as a PhD student. And I looked at him and I thought really hard, and I said, look, I needed to give you a topic, or help you get on a topic that is much better than your master's thesis, which was actually a challenge with a lot of MIT PhD students, because sometimes they did their best work at a master's program, even. But anyway, so that's the other direction, which is really like, how do you make the most out of the people that you have and stuff? And I work extra hard when I see somebody who who is definitely going to be great, and how do I make him big? How do I make him better?
One of the things we do at Berkeley is have, and I think students view it as kind of a silly, like, little checklist that they have to do every semester, where they come in and talk to their advisor about, what is the best thing they've done, what is the worst thing they've done, or whatever, what are they having problems with. But I think what's really important, whether you've got some kind of a setup like that or not, is to talk to your students about their ambitions, their career goals. And if a lot of faculty don't do that, but I try to, and not in every meeting, but like once a year at least, talk to your students. Are you thinking you're going to go into academia? What would you like to do? Do you want to go start a company? Because that will influence me. It influences me in terms of thinking about what thesis topic they should have and how long they should spend finishing it and all that kind of stuff. So.
I agree. Our role is to help our students achieve their full potential, and And yes, we do ask our students, we're forced to actually, to have a conversation about their long-term career goals. So that will help us advise them.
One thing I think that going to faculty job, at least for me, the singular most important thing is I feel I genuinely love these students. Like that, I'm definitely gonna make mistakes. I probably have made a lot of mistakes, but that genuine love and care is going to, it's just important for every student. Yes.
Oh, she's been for a long time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
In continuation to what Daphne said about having male colleagues who are either single or have a wife that takes care of everything, whereas I have 2 kids and a husband outside the house 12 hours every day. Is that adjusted for in the faculty search, or are we just expected not to sleep?
The answer is no, it's not adjusted for.
Unfortunately not. It's not adjusted in our culture.
No.
But just find your support network. That's still important, whether it's at work or in life.
I think one thing to keep in mind is that constraints make you much, much more efficient. So my oldest daughter has now started crew, and she has 3.5 hours a day of practice 6 days a week, and that's on top of high school homework. And all of a sudden, her productivity is actually shot through the roof because she becomes so much more efficient at just squeezing the work in. And we just came back from a parent-teacher conference, and they told us that her homework is impeccably done and so nice. They were like, what happened to the kid I remember from last year who used to turn in crumpled sheets of paper? And so I think in some ways, constraints make you stronger.
I mean, the phrase is, if you want something done quickly, ask a busy person to do it, right?
So I wanted to ask, a lot of the actual work of doing research is not that glamorous. A lot of the time you have self-doubt, you feel like, is this actually an important problem or is this a good direction? How, on a personal level, do you deal with that? How do you get yourself to do the work, even if you're doubting yourself while you're doing it?
Yeah, what do you do when you're doubting yourself?
As a graduate student or as a faculty member?
As a research.
As a graduate student, I think you just go to your advisor, hopefully. I was just at a reunion with a lot of old former students, and one of them remarked that, that of course the professors get all the credit, for their work, because we knew how to make their work sound so good. So I think that all is, it gives you some perspective, right? Puts your work in context. You're working hard day and night in the lab. But I think that's part of the role of the advisor, to help you see the big picture. To see, and when you interview for a job, you should be able to also present that context for your work.
What happens during your junior faculty years? You don't have an advisor anymore.
You get one.
But
You think you get one.
it
as a
goes back
junior
to-
professor.
Yeah, sorry.
I'll also say that in any worthwhile job that you do, you will have similar self-doubts and you will have challenges that you think might be insurmountable. So unless you want to lower your aspirations to a job that doesn't involve reaching higher than you think you could achieve, you will have to deal with that no matter what.
But I think it's a little bit like Monica said earlier. If you've picked a problem that you actually, there's 2 different aspects of it. One is that you're really motivated to work on it, and the other is you like the activity of working on it. And so, if you're not, even if you're not sure that it's going anywhere, so you're not sure you're going to have some big impact, if you actually like the process of, writing code or proving theorems or helping your students to, figure out how to keep them on track, then I think, it's easy to sort of get up every day and the students help a lot, right? The students help a lot because they come in, they're new, they're bright-eyed, they have ideas, and you have to kind of put them on a path. And so that part of it is always fun, even if you're not sure about, your own path or whatever.
It goes back to what Daphne was saying. It's like you have to pick something that you're passionate about because you have to be stuck with this for a little bit. And so there are minor and there are problems that are maybe just temporary, but ultimately you have to love what you do, I would say.
So as a female faculty, so what would be the best time to have kids?
You know,
It's time to have kids.
I was asked this on this panel about 3 or 4 years ago, and I had no answer. So I now have an answer. So my advice is, I mean, first of all, you know, there isn't a perfect time, and you have to decide how much, you know, if you want kids, you should have kids, right? And so the only thing I would say is that a particularly bad time, if you are still young enough that you feel like you can wait, is when somebody like your new department or your postdoc advisor or whatever doesn't know you. Right? It's really nice if you've at least kind of been at a place for a year or so before you say, oh, and now I'm going to start, you know, becoming really distracted for the next. So that, you know, they can give you a lot more kind of leeway if they know you're really successful. If they don't know anything about you, it's hard for them to tell, is this just because she's having kids, or is this? So that's my only advice, is maybe if you can avoid that first year or so.
And actually, if we're on bad times to have kids as opposed to good times to have kids, I would say the year or so right around the time that you're coming up for tenure is a bad time, because that's when you're supposed to be traveling a lot and giving talks to remind people of all the amazing stuff that you've done, and doing that when you have a baby at home is really, really tough.
Daphne, that was my best time. I had Leo, my first son, the year before my tenure.
Okay,
and by the time
to each your own.
By the time I was about to give birth to him, my tenure decision was being made, and I'm like, wow, I really don't care about my tenure. Like, it puts so much perspective.
Previous year, like when you're supposed. No, but if you had Leo the year just before anyway.
Yeah, right. Fei-Fei was doing so well that she didn't have to worry.
No, it's just like, compared to my first baby, tenure is nothing. Seriously.
There's that.
How about the second baby?
No, I would agree. I had my second child sort of after it was too late to do anything about it. I mean, my tenure case was already wrapped up. Yeah, it was a good time.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, do what you want to. Seriously, we can all give you tactical suggestions, just what happened to our lives. But this is so important. Having a family, having kids is such an important part of your life. Do it in your own terms. This is the most important thing I tell my women students.
We should say if that's important to you, right? Not, I mean, if not everybody necessarily wants to have a family, but
that
if it is
decision,
important to
whatever it is, do it on your own terms. Okay, one last question. Someone who hasn't asked.
Okay, so I have a question. You all said how wonderful it was working with students. How do you pick your students, and have there been cases where it hasn't worked out so well?
Oh, yes.
I'm not a good person to ask, because I have a hard time saying no. So actually, over my career, I've gotten a lot of students who didn't work out with other faculty. So and it always works out. I mean, because being fortunate, we have a lot of good students. I mean, they have to be good to be admitted in the first place.
Same here. I let my students pick me. I think that they know what they want better than I know what they are like. And so when they choose something that they are interested in, it works better.
I think, I mean, you do have to watch for students who are, you know, suffering from self-doubt and those kinds of things. And that doesn't make them bad students, by the way. I think, I haven't had problems with kind of overall bad students, but this issue of, you know, how do you motivate somebody, or, you know, at what point do you have them, you know, either because they come to you or because you suggest to them they switch topics or something like that, right? You have to, you know, you have to figure out. It goes back to what does the student want, and how, you know, and can you kind of get them through this period, or do they need to do something significant, take a year off or whatever? But you have to just kind of look at the whole picture.
I guess I'm going to present a somewhat contrarian perspective here. I think each of us has a certain set of expectations of the kind of research that the group is going to focus on, and for some students, their skill sets and their aspirations will align with what you want to do, and for others it won't, and it's different for different advisors. So some will really value sort of amazing coding ability, and others will value the ability to think about conceptually and mathematically challenging problems, and some students are going to be better at one versus the other. And if you end up with a student where your expectations and aspirations are really misaligned with their skill set, and you're basically dragging them by the nose to a direction that's really not consistent. Sometimes you can work around it and find a project that is a good match, which is great, but sometimes there's just, it's just the wrong fit, and those students will consume inordinate amounts of your time relative to the ones that are aligned, and often it will not end up being a successful relationship on either side, which is particularly problematic in your earlier critical pre-tenure years where you don't have that time to invest in a student that's a bad match. Doesn't mean they're a bad student. It just means that it's not a good match. And I think trying to figure that out to the extent that you can before you align with them, and if not, then figure it out as quickly as possible after, and if necessary, basically saying it's better for us to part ways. And I know that seems hard and ruthless and like, oh my God, but it may be better for, I think it's better for everyone. I did that only a couple times in my career where I said, look, you're awesome, but this is just not the right match. And they ended up doing wonderful things with a different advisor. So it's really, you should think of it as, it's not a statement on them or a statement on you. It's just a question of whether there is good alignment. And the sooner you discover that and cut this loose and allow people to be successful elsewhere, I think it's better for everybody.
All right, with that, thank you so much. That's an amazing panel. Thank you.